I would like to first of all say thank you to everyone for joining us here tonight. I have a little bit of housekeeping guidelines before we start. So just to let you know, the talk is 75 minutes in duration, and we plan to finish by 17:45 Hong Kong time and 20:45 Sydney, Melbourne, Queensland time. And during the talk, we'll be keeping the video and audio to ourselves and speakers, but we would love questions. So we'll have time at the end for a Q&A, and please feel free during the talk to pop questions into the chat room, and we'll endeavour to answer as many of those as we can. Also a note, you probably noticed this when you entered the room, but we are recording this talk, and we reserve the right to use the recordings. So I would also like to say that this session is being captioned by Marissa and Olivia. And if you would like the captioning to be visible to you, you just need to click on the close caption button, and that's at the bottom of your window. So I'll just give a moment for people who want to do that. Okay, great. Housekeeping complete. So before I start, I would, of course, like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land for those of us in Australia. And I'm on Gadigal soil tonight, and my workplace is actually on Darug. And of course, there would be others joining us from many other countries, and we would pay our respects to all the elders, past and present. And I would really like to acknowledge and thank them for sharing their culture and their land with us. Okay, welcome everyone. We're kicking off the fourth and the last virtual live streaming talk, Eventide Conversation Series. And this is supported by the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations. Tonight for our talk, we're focusing on identity, practice and community. And just to let you know, I'm Joanne Key, and I'm the moderator, and I am from Australia, and I'm the executive producer and responsible for the artistic direction of Riverside's National Theatre of Parramatta. And we actually focus on creating and producing authentic professional work that resonates with our community. And I'm an older Asian woman. That kind of makes me sound as though I'm stooped over, but I'm not. I've got black red hair and red rimmed glasses, and I'm wearing the obligatory black tonight. And I am so thrilled to be chatting with Raghav, Handa and Pu Yen, and they're going to share some insights into their work and the perspectives of their respective art forms. And I will just give you a tiny bit of background. I know there was something to read, but I always think it's nice to do an intro. So Raghav is an Australian choreographer and performer of Indian heritage, and his training is in modern and Indigenous contemporary dance. He was actually originally inspired to dance through Kathak, and I think he can tell you more of that story later because that's really great. And his work is ever evolving, and it integrates music, spoken word, video, and movement. His most recent performance was of his work too at the 𝐓𝐸𝐴sia Festival, and he managed to choreograph a work for Sydney Dance Company in 2020 in between COVID lockdowns. Was commissioned by Sydney Opera House Digital's Unwrapped program, and that was actually a response to the lockdown. And his work has been described as innovative, robust, complex and hypnotic. Maybe they should also add charismatic, I think, to that one. And Pu Yen Lee was born in New York, and she was educated in Hong Kong for her primary years before returning for high school and college back to the States. And she comes from a long family tradition of Cantonese opera, and was taught by numerous famed Cantonese opera performers, and not to mention her parents actually were Cantonese opera performers who, in the best Asian tradition, discouraged their child from wanting to be a performer. So as well as performing in many roles at numerous festivals around the world, Pu Yen also has her own troupe and is exploring the cross-disciplinary potential of her art form. And she's done works such as Arrant Revenge, was an adaptation of Shakespeare's Hamlet, which is like really fascinating to take an old form into a new world. So I'm actually going to kick off with Pu-Yen and ask her to give a little bit of background for us on why you were drawn to the art form despite original parental resistance.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Pu-Yen, Cantonese opera performer. Just maybe should I start off with a little bit background about Cantonese opera, just in case most people might not have watched it. Cantonese opera is one of the 200 regional operas in China, and it's called Cantonese opera because it's actually from the Canton region. It's sung in the Cantonese dialect, and the main, I guess one of the main difference between a regional opera, among the regional operas are basically the music, the percussion, and the dialect it's sung in. So it's sung in Cantonese dialect. It's sung, it's played with Cantonese music, and also we have our own set of special sets of percussions, which is different, very different from other regional operas, and the usage of these percussions. So also Cantonese opera, Chinese opera, it's not the same as Western opera. It's more like a theater form. It's not just about singing and the music. We have music, singing, dance, and movements all combined in one theatrical piece, and that's more like a kind of like a Broadway show than more like a Western opera concept. So just to give you guys a little background on what Cantonese opera might look like. So personally, just to go back to Joanne's question, personally, because I'm actually third generation Cantonese opera performer within the family, my grandparents, my grandmother, she was also a performer. My grandfather was a playwright, and then my father and my mother were also performers. They actually met on stage, so that was kind of fun. And then so then they gave birth to me in the States after they immigrated to New York, and they really didn't want me to do this, get into this field. I actually even though I actually fell in love with this art form because I saw my mom perform when I was in kindergarten while I was in Hong Kong. And that's actually when I actually decided to pursue this in kindergarten. And I'm not kidding, like really, I have not changed my mind since then. So even though my parents keep wishful thinking, like they kept their wishful thinking all through the years, because I told them in kindergarten, I said, oh, I really want to be like you, Mom. And she's like, no, you're going to change your mind. And then in grade school, I told them again, I said, I really like this. I think this is really cool. I want to do this. And then she's like, no, you know what? You're too young. Like maybe you'll find something else you like later. And then when I'm in high school, I actually did my senior project on Cantonese opera, researching in New York City. And then again, they're like, well, you should finish your college first. And then after that, maybe, you find something else that you like and you can do whatever you want after that. So I was like, okay, fine. So I went to college. And then finally after that, after college, after 2 years of working, and I've decided, I still have not changed my mind since kindergarten. And since my parents kind of like wishfully ignored all my requests of wanting to pursue this career all these years, so I've decided to just take things into my hands. So I quit my job and called up my dad after I quit my job and told him and be like, okay, you know what, I just quit my job, Dad. And he said, okay, cool, do you want to go to grad school? Have you found your next job? I said, nope. And he said, okay, what are you gonna do? I'm like, I'm gonna go back to Hong Kong and study Cantonese opera and do what you guys did like 20 years ago. And they're like, what? So my dad flipped out and he's like, okay, you're gonna come home next weekend. Actually, you're gonna come home this coming weekend and we're gonna talk. And then, I went home, I talked, and then luckily, I kind of really showed them how much I really like this and how much I really want to pursue this. And there's no like stopping me. Basically, if they say no, I'm just going to buy my one-way ticket and fly back to Hong Kong by myself. So, so luckily I got my parents' support. So they were very supportive of me after that, since I really showed them my determination. And so, despite all that, I've been doing this for almost 10 years now professionally, since I've studied. So that's pretty much my journey of kind of fighting for my passion and, for Cantonese opera. Yeah.
That's really great. Thanks so much. Raghav, over to you. Like what, a little bit about your background.
Thanks, Joanne, and thanks for the introduction. Great being here with everybody tonight. My name is Raghav Handa, and I am on 𝐓𝐚𝐥𝐤 country, which is northern beaches of Sydney in New South Wales in Australia. I'm a choreographer and a dancer, and I use dance as a space or as a language to talk about things that are sometimes uncomfortable and to make sense of the world, really. And I never sort of I never really went into dance as a conscious. It was never a conscious decision. So I really admire Pooyan for persevering with what she wanted to do. My entry into dance was somewhat a byproduct of the situation, really. My mum had purchased a 10-class pass for my sister to learn Kathak dance, which is a North Indian classical dance form. And I'll tell you about the form in a little bit. But my sister never wanted to sort of, continue after the first class. So my mum wanted to just get her money's worth. So she said, hey, you're going to use the rest of the lessons. And so for a couple of years from there on, I learned Kathak. And that was my first ever connection with a structured form of dance, at that age, because dance, for me was never a possibility of a profession. Dance for myself and my family, was something that we did to facilitate cultural and ceremonial practices, to pass on family songs and stories, and it was a way of connecting younger and older members of the family or the clan in an informal space. So, and knowing me, I like to have a go. So I was always up at the front, giving it my all, but I never actually knew, you could follow dance as a profession and make dance as a lifelong practice. So it wasn't until I finished my high school, which is grade 12, that I really threw myself into dance, and and so I never looked back since. So that's how I'm here today. Thank you.
I might just flick back to Pooyan and a little bit more about actually your art form and practice and what you're currently doing, and how you're both doing, like how is the work that you're doing, which is the traditional and the new, and the new coming into that.
Okay, so just now I kind of gave like a more verbal description of what I do. So maybe I'll show you guys some images about what, so I actually specialize in the lead female role, and it's, as you can see, thank you, Melanie, for pulling out the picture. So actually, as you can see, it's with elaborate makeup, and the so-called female lead role are actually portrayal of young ladies, and they're not just any young ladies. They're usually the proper, respectable, with like all the Chinese virtuous ladies, like virtuous. You have to be chaste, you have to be honorable, you have to be kind of like that kind of lady, stereotypical lady. So as Melanie's, sorry, thank you, Melanie, could you pull that back? Thanks. Yeah, perfect. Yes. So so the earlier picture, was one of the ladies, and this is a princess, a young princess. And then the next picture, yes, it's also it's a young courtesan. So usually, so these are like, you can see, sometimes I have like really elaborate headdress. Sometimes I might not, if it's a poor lady, like she's more in distress right now. So she has like no accessories. The one before the last picture has lots of jewelries. And then the next picture, please. Yes, and then this one actually you see even more elaborate with the pheasant. These are, you see the ones I'm holding up, they're pheasant feathers. And these actually means that this lady actually can fight. She's more like a general instead of the last three pictures where it's a princess, a poor young lady, a courtesan, and a prisoner. But this one, she's actually in martial arts. And you can see on the side where there's like a pink thing tassel, like that's actually part of the sword. So she can fight. But usually the female lead can fight and you don't have to. And this is just one image that that I'm doing a lady who can actually have some fighting. So that kind of concludes the images of, thank you, Melanie. Yeah, so that's what Cantonese opera, the females look like. There we have lots of elaborate headdresses when needed. And we have really elaborate makeup. It takes about when I first started, it took me 2 hours. Now it takes about 1 hour, but it still takes at least 1 hour to put everything on from head to toe. So it's actually quite a lot of work. So those are the traditional things. And I learned it from my mom. I really wanted to share this when I was talking about, I forgot, when I was talking about how I actually watched my mom when I was young. So here's a picture. It's a really old picture, so I didn't have the screen. This is my mom. And this is me. And I saw her performing on stage at pretty much like this age. And that's when I fell in love with this art form. I think it's beautiful. And you can see these are more the traditional stuff. And I actually, I don't know if I should use the word inherit, but because she's still alive, but I actually am wearing her costumes now. So all her costumes that she owned now has passed down to me. And when I perform, I actually wear her stuff. And for me, it's a very meaningful family tradition thing. I'm really glad I can carry it on for my family. As for, so right now, most of my work involve traditional performances with the elaborate makeup, as you've seen in those pictures, which is very common in all the traditional style. But recently, in the past about 3 to 5 years, I actually started exploring more into a newer form. I wouldn't say I'm trying to reform it, but more trying to, I guess, find ways to introduce Cantonese opera into other art form. I actually think that it's very versatile because we have drama, dance, music. So all these chunks can be broken apart, put together, or you can kind of like, we can try to play around with these chunks. And you know, so I started with about 5 years ago, we did an adaptation of Hamlet. It wasn't too untraditional, but what we did was we adapted Hamlet into a Chinese story. So we made it like, we found like some historical background, Chinese historical background for it. We changed a little bit just to fit into the Chinese ideals. So we did that. And then later on, I actually went further from the traditional theatrical form. The last performance I did, I actually worked with Hong Kong Dance Company, and we based this collaboration on one traditional Cantonese opera script, and kind of like the dancers worked their dancing part, and then we tried to mix Cantonese opera into the dance and did a collaboration that way. I've also worked with Samson Young, another young installation artist, a musician actually, also, and he based his one piece called Immortals, and it's based on a Chinese folklore. And then he invited me to actually input some Cantonese opera elements, because in Cantonese opera we actually have a scene that talks about that story, specific story that he works on. He based his piece on, and it's called Immortals. So I actually, you know, from that traditional script, I took out elements, the singing, the music, and some movements, and brought it into his contemporary piece. And his part, he brought in like jazz vocalist and a band, and we try to like jam, and it was like a really fun collaboration. So, you know, lately I've been really trying to not really reform the art form, but more like, because I'm actually a traditionalist myself deep down, because I love the traditional stuff. I actually think it should be preserved the way as is, but at the same time, it's kind of it's an acquired taste. So you can't, for someone who've never watched Cantonese opera before, it can be quite hard to stomach in the beginning. Like they might come in and be like, what was that? I have no idea. So in order to kind of like, I guess to try to like make it more accessible to more audience. So I really would like to work more with other forms, other performing arts form, to try to like collaborate or kind of inject some sort of Cantonese opera element, be it the movements, the makeup, the costume, the music, the script, whatever, like, and try to like bring in other audience to understand like the beauty of Cantonese opera, because I think every aspect of Cantonese opera is beautiful and deserves to be appreciated. So yeah, thank you.
That sounds so fascinating, you know, that I want to see it. So okay, Raghav, what would you like to tell us a little bit about your art form practice?
Thanks, Pooyan. That was wow, the photographs were beautiful.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed those. Look, I mean, I suppose I can speak a little bit about the training that I've had to really just give some context around what I do now. So I was speaking about a Kathak dance earlier on, and it is a North Indian classical dance form. And a bit like what Pooyan was saying in terms of having music, dance, and theatricality in one as a single entity. And so Kathak is pretty much that. It's the dance, the music, and the emotion and the performance is viewed as one art form, and it's virtuosic, and how it differs from other classical Indian and South Indian dance forms is it's a vertical form. So you stand on both 2 feet, and there's also this. It uses a very complex, like highly codified rhythm structures that the dancers have to learn to be able to sort of respond to the tabla player, who is the percussionist, and also to riff off with them, and also to be able to be ready themselves physically to divert attention away from the set rhythm structures to improvise a little bit. So so in that way, Kathak is a very highly it is a highly codified sort of system of movements and mathematics of sound. And on top of that, I've had the opportunity over the last 12 years to work with Australian Indigenous contemporary dance techniques. And I'm also trained in modern techniques like Graham, Lamont, Release. And so those sort of influences and the knowledge that I hold in my body, the sensibility, the rhythms, I draw on those to create complex movement passages, structures that I hope are unique in the Australian dance landscape. And that's the physicality. So I really now at this point, I really don't have to think about what I'm drawing on, and it sort of comes out in a way that it's more natural. So that's where I wanted to get to. And so my style then becomes quite dynamic. It's quite physical. It relies on quite complex rhythm structures. So I don't usually work in 8, so the count of 8. I could work in 5.75, or I could work in 6, or I could work for 7.5 rhythm cycles. So it gives me freedom to really just blow it out of the water and just make it my own. So yeah, so that's that in terms of my style. That's how I work, and how I use, in a way, how I use Kathak in my practice. Kathak itself has freedom around the improvisational structures, where the dancer and the musician can enter into this game of to and fro that could last for a very long time. And so they try to trick each other and do one-up on the other. And so I rely on that. And I like the humor that it gives me. I like the structure, how it is sometimes can be so formal and so informal. So I try to sort of use those sort of structures in my works. So what I will do, I will request Melanie to play a little video for us, and it perhaps will give you an overview of what I'm speaking about. Thank you, Melanie.
And then they leave there, and at the time of the show, I go with the bang like.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Melanie.
much for that. Yeah, it was wonderful to see a snapshot of your work. It's so interesting that there is actually a common thread with both of your practice and how you respond to music. And I'm really interested in Chinese opera. There's a really set form, but it seems as though you're able to, in a way, kind of improvise along that. Is that my understanding of that correct? Or
yeah, actually, well, it was I love that rhythm that Raghav's video,
yeah,
the
it's
it was
fantastic.
like, wow, yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, so it's kind of like what Raghav was saying, how we actually it is a very codified form. I mean, we have like really set basic stuff that we need to learn that we can apply on stage, like sequences, the stylized movements, and they're quite set in itself, in the form, the makeup and everything, and how we look could be quite codified. But at the same time, once we're on stage, actually for Cantonese opera, there are a lot of there are quite some liberty for the performer, between the performer and the musicians. We actually have ways to communicate between each other while on stage, and every night of performance there could be really subtle differences, because depending on the mood or the condition of the actor and the performer on stage. And we could, even for certain singing sections, it could be different every night if the performer desires so. So when we actually, the script that we get, it's all in words. So there are very minimal music notations, because certain some we have different kinds of how to say it, singing forms. So we have tunes and we have the accompanied, we call it, how should I translate? So there are no set tunes. So either there are songs that have set tunes and there are songs that don't have set tunes. And the ones without set tunes, there are certain rules. So as long as we follow the rules, there are a lot of liberty on how we can sing and interpret those librettos. And each singer can decide on their own. And you can sometimes decide on the spot, which is possible, because for those songs that have no set tunes, the musicians supposedly follow us. So whatever we sing, so they don't really perform together, unlike the Western opera where they actually look at the scores and then the singers also sing according to the scores. We don't really do it that way. Only the ones with the set tunes we sing along with the scores, but other than that, there shouldn't be any notations traditionally. So we can actually the artist will sing, and then the musician will have to listen and follow very closely what we're singing and replicate and accompany us that way. As long as we kind of perform within the rules, then we're fine. I mean, if you go out of the rules, then that's not good, then that's not right. So that's that. So we have a lot of liberty, and not just for the singing part, also for the movements. We have signals that we can give the percussionist. If we want certain things from the percussionist to give us some like response, then there are ways and rules that we can use to do that. So maybe each night we might sometimes, so it's not the movements on stage are not so set in stone. We can kind of change it or a little bit here and there every night if we wish to, or you can set it but it's actually quite liberal. Which I find very fun and interesting, and that's which is kind of hard to grasp for a lot of young performers to that certain extent. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And Raghav, what about you? Like, like obviously you're responding to a whole load of different creative possibilities as well.
Yes, so I feel unlike what Pooyan was saying, what I tend to do is when it comes to using rhythm in my work, it is always set. So improvisational elements are very strong in my work, especially the last link you've seen, the work with myself and the tabla player called 2, which premiered in Sydney and then later traveled to Australia last month. That work was solely based on challenging the whole concept and the traditional hierarchy of Kathak dance. So I made it very clear that I wasn't deconstructing the form. Like, who the hell do I think I am to do anything like that? The form has existed for 1,000 years and more, and it was still continue to evolve and be this beautiful sort of cultural celebration for long after I am gone. And so it was an attempt at inhabiting the environment, the principles of Kathak in my own way. And the work kind of started off from there. And I was able to then work quite closely with my long-term collaborator, the tabla maestro, Mahashi Ravu, to sort of come into the space and do the improvisational exercises that I normally do with dancers. And because he's a very good dancer, we were able to progress that work so much further and, bring in the humor element of it and a visual art element of it, the set design and the poster. I'm not sure if you've seen the poster, but all of what I did in that work was part of breaking open the set principles of Kathak dance, where the performance spaces and the performers themselves are quite segregated. So I just had a question in mind, that what would it be like for the musician to go mobile in space and for the dancer to play his tablas? So it really was that provocation, and it just blew out. itself into this huge sort of interaction between myself and Maharshi. So, I can't help but being collaborative, and I can't help work in a way that I am, sort of pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. So for me, that's the really good way of me sort of opening my practice up and learning, yeah.
Great, thank you. So also just want to encourage anyone who's listening now, if you've got a question, please do put it on the chat line, because we'd just love to hear what you might be interested in, because I also find that fascinating as well. So Pu-Yen, I am also wondering, like living in Hong Kong and living in New York and then studying. Actually, I want to get onto audiences, but I also think it's fascinating when you were talking to me earlier, you were actually mentioning how you were actually able to train to a professional level in the States for Chinese opera, for an art form that obviously isn't performed that much in the US, I'm assuming. But I'd love you to actually tell that to our audience.
Yeah, actually, well, there used to be actually a huge Cantonese opera diaspora, starting from, I think, even back to like the 1930s. Actually, Cantonese opera troupes have been traveling to many countries even earlier than Beijing Opera actually did. So I've heard from my father that there were troupes that went to, of course, the Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and then they also would go all the way to the States. There are Cantonese opera footprints even in Cuba. So it's like we really, Cantonese opera are all over the world, probably because Cantonese people are the first to really immigrate outside of China, and there's Cantonese all over the place. So wherever there are Cantonese people, they actually like to invite like Cantonese opera troupes. So basically, like maybe once a year, they would try to like get donations, among the Cantonese community, and then they would hire these professional troupes, like these troupes over. And a lot of Cantonese opera performers actually ended up like staying in the States. So over the years, there are tons of Cantonese opera performers who actually immigrated to the States. So that's how when my dad decided to support my idea of pursuing this professionally, he actually said that he actually suggested that I actually do my training in the States. And he actually found me immigrated professional artists. Either they were retired or they immigrated, and they were still actually actively teaching, of course, amateurs, but they were actually having like classes in the States, teaching singing, and also so I actually studied with a Beijing opera performer, a Shanghainese opera performer, a Cantonese opera lead musicianist within New York City, and had of course, on top of my parents teaching me themselves, all the foundation training, I actually got my movements training, my music training through all these teachers who were wonderful artists before they immigrated. I mean, of course, they still are wonderful artists, but they were professional artists before they immigrated to the States. So I was actually training full-time in New York for about 3 years before I debuted in Hong Kong. And of course, it's a lifelong training. So, I mean, I'm still studying now, but it was just that I did all my foundation work, training work in the States with all these wonderful artists who actually immigrated to the States. And so it's quite wonderful that, there are these professionals outside of China, Hong Kong, so.
I know, it's just so fascinating that actually you could train to that high level without a teaching institution, which probably actually then segues into Raghav, because you actually your training is a bit sort of loose in a way. And, maybe how did you get involved with Indigenous artists?
Yes, I feel, as I was saying earlier, that I entered dance through a back door, and I feel I've been more fortunate that way. I've been more fortunate because of the language and the knowledge that I've accumulated in my body. I feel it's given me such a strong platform to really break open what I want to do and how I want to do it. And I feel what Puyan was saying earlier on, how the opera artists actually stayed in New York over the years. I really feel, and over the last little while, that dance has long cast light on how nations themselves are reproduced through aesthetics and kinesthetic practices. And also the diversity of our nations and stories. Foregrounds have dance and performance become important projects of the nation, controlling memory, history, migration, populations, by linking geopolitics to the bodies of the practitioners. And I think I keep those sort of ideas in my brain fair bit, and how and I also consider the implications of struggles over power, territory, and cultural practices. And I feel when I approach those modalities, or I approach those provocations, I really draw on the training and the knowledge that I've been given. In terms of Indigenous dance, I started taking lessons with this Indigenous choreographer, who is my dance mother, so to speak, Vicky Van Hoot, and she invited me to do her dance classes. And 12 years later, I was doing full-length Indigenous works all around, across Australia and internationally. And and that kind of some of the works were out of protest. So the idea of protest is ingrained in my body. How you use dance to sort of break open the idea of challenging power. So all of those things are quite so personal and ingrained in me that they come out in all different styles and all different parts of my work. So yeah.
I actually didn't realize that you had that connection with Vicky, because she is also, for those of you who might not know her work, she is like an outstanding artist in terms of how she creates, and she pushes boundaries and forms. And also she's a hard taskmaster. So if you learnt with her, she would have put you through the ringer. But I'm sure that some of the teachers you had as well, Puyan, were like really tough. Yeah. So I'm also interested as well in terms of, you both had growing up years in Western cultures, and I'm just wondering as well how, not just how it's affected your practice, but how has the community, how have audiences responded, or have you found that there has been an audience in the US, but mainly Puyan, you practice in Hong Kong. So I'm just wondering, like how you see the community or the engagement, or who the audiences are and what attracts them.
Well, currently, my work is mostly based in Hong Kong. Cantonese opera is still quite pretty much currently limited to a more Cantonese speaking audience, but I actually do see the potential. I mean, I totally feel that there is a great potential to bring it to the international audience. So basically what I've been doing ever since I came back to Hong Kong to work on this is I translate a lot of Cantonese opera scripts for with subtitles. So all the productions produced by my troupes, we make sure there are English and Chinese subtitles. And I think that actually helps you know, in case with international audience or any tourists who might be interested in checking out this really Cantonese opera performances to understand what's going on stage. Because I mean, if we can watch, I mean, I don't speak Italian or French, but I love watching like Western opera just the same. And I just, you know, I enjoy it by the music itself, and also I understand what's going on because there are subtitles. So I mean, that's one important work I've been doing, and I've been advocating for other troops to try to follow suit. And we've brought Cantonese opera to the States and Canada, but unfortunately still mainly Chinese audience, but hopefully through more, that's why I try to work with more artists with other art forms so that I can bring in more attention to Cantonese opera itself. And yeah, I mean, seriously, any like platforms would be great to you know, for me to advocate Cantonese opera to more international audience. And really, I think the English subtitles would serve like a big purpose for that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really true about the subtitles. And you're actually saying that most other companies don't do that. That's something you've been developing?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of the local troops in Hong Kong, they actually don't place so much. I mean, a lot of response I get, oh, well, how many foreigners are coming anyway? So why am I spending the resource on this? But I'm like, you know what, if you can get one and that one person told his friends, then you can get 5 next time, right? So if you don't get started, I mean, there's no, and plus, you know, even Chinese, like Hong Kong people, sometimes I have friends who would, you know, younger generation, they'd come to me and be like, you know what, I love your English subtitle, because even if reading the Chinese subtitles, they don't understand what's going on. Even with the Chinese, they have to read my English subtitles to understand what's going on, because I actually really made it simpler, it's very simplified, and it's just very like quick translation of what's going on stage to have them understand what's going on. So I mean, I really think it's not just for foreign audience, just even for people who are not the normal Cantonese opera audience. I actually do think the subtitles are very, very important to promote this art form to the younger generation and to expand our audience base. So
yeah, actually it is really interesting, because through that, even with your interpretation, you can actually change it again with the, you know, with the words, and, you know, whether you subtitle as for an older audience or a younger audience as well. Yeah, really interesting. So Raghav, how, I mean, your audience has been really varied, because I don't know, how have the Indian audience responded to your work, or do you find it's a different audience?
Look, I'm going to be honest. Starting when I started creating my works, the first few works, it was all predominantly contemporary dance communities, visual art communities, and theater communities coming to the works, and they were my communities, you know, because I kind of grew up and trained in them, and so and over the years, I've had the opportunity through the SBS and ABC radio and television here in Australia. They have been following, and Indian linked publications. They've been following my works in a way that they open up to this whole side of the, you know, side of Australia, which is, you know, there's Indian communities in every state, and they're growing, and so and through just through a lot of opening up a program of workshops every time I travel or work, and I link in with the Indian community there, I found that I've started to gain a following, and even recently through two, I did this workshop in Adelaide, and there was a, you know, it was a dance workshop, but there was about 10 senior Indian citizens, Indian Australian people turned up, wanted to do a dance workshop with professional dancers, and so I had to sort of quickly, you know, navigate that and how I include them in the workshop. So, you know, it's happening now, but when I was starting off, it was predominantly just contemporary dance and you know, contemporary theatre and visual art communities coming to the works. but also I try to diversify, who I collaborate with. And so I sort of carry on, that I invite that kind of viewing as well. One of my earlier works, Mens Rea, which looked at shape-shifting in dance through the lens of a Indian epic. It's a big Indian epic, and so some really physical and animated epic. And part of the work people view it with 3D motion capture glasses, and because there's a CG version of myself that I have a fight with, kind of thing. And so that kind of invited all this technological side of audience. And so I like to sort of play with the form that I want to work with, and therefore I try to diversify my audiences as well that way.
Hey, great. I know that we've got a few questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to ask you guys one last question before we head to there. And what I'm really interested in is, like, what excites you and what project are you working on at the moment? Yeah. So I'm happy for either of you to start first.
You mean like my current work that I'm...
Yeah, like what excites you about what you're doing, and yeah.
Well, basically, so I'll get started. I mean, besides doing the normal traditional performances, which has been ongoing, like my next performance is actually quite daring. I'm developing this one-person black box experimental workshop, exploring movements and sequences, and I named it Curiosity Kills a Cat. So basically it kind of revolves around trying to develop or using existing sequence to kind of come up with another sequence that actually depicts killing a cat. So I mean, it's an ongoing experiment. I'm actually working with another installation with an artist, Enoch Chang, another young performer. So it's not Cantonese opera. It's just an experiment that I'm testing out from my knowledge, from what I've had learned so far, and then looking for breaking things down, and hopefully by deconstructing what I've learned to further understand and study more about what needs to be done and what can be done, the potential and things like that. So that's my next really exciting and very daring project. And then next year, I'm doing more traditional work, as well as I'm working with other companies on a more contemporary presentation of traditional scripts. So actually, I'm very excited to have all these opportunities to try out different things on top of doing traditional stuff. I mean, I'll never stop it because I love it so much, and it should stay. Like, don't try to take things away too much. But I definitely see there are tons of rooms to actually try to test out Cantonese opera with other art forms, or maybe try out something new, to add something new into it. That's fine, but not to take away from the traditional stuff. Like, the traditional ways of performing can stay that way, but I think we can allow room to explore and to further develop and see what can we come up with for the next to get younger audience. So
yeah, well, I hope that we get a chance to see both the traditional and the other over here in Australia. So yeah, keep us posted. Raghav.
I think I'm excited about things starting to sort of come back in Australia in terms of performance. And so over the next little while, what am I doing? I'm creating a couple of works. As you know, Joanne, I'm also working with National Theatre of Parramatta on co-creating a play with this fabulous director, Darren Yap, and writer Hilary Bell. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also working on another work, dance theatre work called Follies of God, which looks at the idea of language and how one language can be weaponized basically to assert control, dominance, and how the language works in terms of you know, in terms of how people can lose their freedom due to blasphemy or saying something wrong, and so how one language can mean so many different things, and how it can be weaponized. And so in that way, I'm using the ancient language of Sanskrit to create an aria, which will be sung in Sanskrit, and I'm working with James Brown, who's an experimental sound artist on the score and the delivery of the project, so which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that will also sounds really interesting too, because James Brown is such an interesting artist as well. I'm going to head to the Q&A now, and Hu-Yen, the first question is about, would you like to share some more about your collaboration with Samson Young?
Yes. Well, to just a quick note, I probably can't describe the whole thing. So actually, if you go to Samson's website, if you type Samson Young and Immortals on Google, you can actually find more information on it. I think he has pictures and maybe like clips of the singing, the music of that show. It's done about 3 years ago in New York City on Governor's Island. The name is called Immortals, and in Cantonese opera, or more the Chinese folklore, it talks about 8 immortals crossing the ocean to celebrate the heaven goddess, Heaven's mother's birthday. So that's basically the story. It's like 8 immortals crossing the ocean. And we have that scene. We have that in Cantonese opera. So that's why Samson found me. And then I kind of studied, I did a close study of that that script. And then I pulled out some lyrics, some librettos, and some movements, and kind of put it into his performance. So there are sections where I played all 8 immortals in that show, and I also played and then specifically he wanted me to focus on the fairy, the lotus fairy. So I did that. We also I wrote some new lines for it, and then I also studied some more traditional music score that actually has recently been researched by one of our very musician called Ko Yun-hong, and he actually helped me with the scores, with the traditional scores. So I kind of collaborated, incorporated that into Samson's show as well. And also I worked with the jazz vocalist, and we kind of jammed something together. Like it was quite interesting. Yeah, so I mean, I encourage you to actually Google and find more on that. So yeah.
Hey, it sounds really fascinating. I'm going to look it up afterwards. So Raghav, I'm just going to, the question is about finding it hard to promote traditional art to kids and teenagers now. And what do you see as the opportunities and the challenges?
Oh, wow. I feel we are in different time now when I was growing up. Obviously, I think it's the exposure to dance, to art, it is so immense now with the advent of technology and the interface that we use. We click and it's there, and I think so the art in general and dance especially has had a lot of exposure, and through school programs, through organizations like theater companies, performance companies and theaters themselves, like the Opera House, and so they all have opened their doors up to trying to engage young students and teenagers or young people in the creation and the experiencing of art. And so I think so there is already so much going on, which gives this big opportunity for for anyone who is interested, to explore what that is. It's just simplest thing is to go and find out for yourself, and I feel that's where the time is very different now, because when I was growing up, I had no idea that you could take art as a profession and make it your vocation for life. Somebody had to tell me that you can do that. So, and I think if we can get them young, if we can bring them to the dark side, early on, then I think we're doing good. So, but I do think that especially through how we're developing the technology and the interface that we're working with, that means all the mediums like iPads or phones or something, as that start to develop and the programs and the apps start to develop, I think then there's more of a accessibility, that we increase the accessibility for the younger audiences, and I think that's where the real growth area is next, is how we match the digital and the online sphere with what we are trying to achieve. If we can marry them in the same way, I think we're doing very good.
Hey, thank you for that. I mean, did you want to comment on that one, Huyen, or?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Raghav about trying to bring in the younger audience by actually engaging them into the art form itself. So actually, we have to bring them to the dark side. So we actually have quite some programs, and I mean, we're grateful the government has been quite supportive with bringing Cantonese opera into actually the education, with I think within the music education, and there are, I think there were research trying to actually thinking that it's a good idea to include Cantonese opera into the Chinese language lessons, because our librettos are quite poetic and can be studied as a text by itself. So all these, like, having Cantonese opera mentioned in school program, I think is very helpful. We also have a lot of young performers who are actually teaching Cantonese opera as like a club, like in extracurricular activities at a lot of schools, in the secondary schools and grade schools. There are teen programs run by my fellow performers to teach as an extracurricular activities, like outside of school, so that parents can actually take them there to learn on the weekends. And all these like would help the kids to get in touch. I mean, as I told, I always think that being in touch with Cantonese opera when you're young is very important, because that's how I got engaged. Like, if my parents never exposed me to that, I might not know, I might not fall in love with it. But if you're exposed, and then there's always a chance to start falling in love with this art form at a young age. I mean, even if you don't like grow up liking it, you always have the option to come back when you get older. And actually a lot of that happened, especially if with immigrated Cantonese people, like a lot of the people who immigrated to the States, like my friends who like to watch Cantonese opera in the States, they're like, oh, I hated it when I was young. But once I'm in New York, I kind of feel like, I think they wanted to find something to feel connected with home, or with the Cantonese culture. So then that's when they get older, when they're in their mid like 40s, when their career is more stable and everything, then they kind of have to, find something to do far away from home that feels like their home. So they always go, like, even though they didn't really pay attention to Cantonese opera when they're young, or they would start actually looking for Cantonese opera when they reach that certain age, which goes back to the fact that a lot of people would be like, oh, why is Cantonese opera audience older? Like, why do we always see these old audience? Where are the young people? I mean, when I was young, I kind of feel like, yeah, maybe it's old fashioned, that's why people don't like it. But somehow I kind of feel like, no, that's not the case, because sometimes it has to do with like your life experience, especially with Cantonese opera, because it's such a rich and sophisticated art form. When you're young, you might not be able to fully understand and grasp what the scripts and the music or what's going on stage. It might not touch you the same way as it would touch you when you reach like when you're middle age. So given a lot of all these different circumstances, it kind of happens that we have a lot of mid-age and older audience, regular audience. But I mean, now that I've been in the field for more than 10 years, I kind of feel like that's not really a problem. As long as we engage them or kind of expose them when they're young, eventually they'll find their way to fall in love with Cantonese opera when they get older. So it's not like I don't think it's so urgent to try to like fill the theater with like teenagers. But it's more like we want to teach them to respect this art form and kind of appreciate and know that it exists, so that when they're ready to find something to you know, later on in their life to like to do besides work, then they can choose. Like Cantonese opera is always an option, and somehow at some point they would find Cantonese opera, especially for those who are not in Hong Kong anymore. So yeah.
Thanks for that. It kind of slides into the next one, because we've been asked, have you considered putting your Cantonese opera work as a global touring project?
Oh yes, constantly. Constantly. I have actually tons of ideas in mind, big and small, to bring a full troupe around the world. I mean, it used to be easier, but now that, because, you know, salaries are higher and it's really not that easy, and especially during COVID. Now currently it's pretty much impossible. But even before COVID, like, you know, I mean, I always try to, I mean, getting funding is quite it's hard, because the whole troupe involves minimum around at least 60 people. So moving 60 people from Hong Kong around the world is quite difficult. I've tried smaller scale performances where like, for example, when I performed in New York once, I actually engaged local artists, local musicians, and those are retired or immigrated professionals. But nowadays it's harder to find immigrated professionals or retired professionals overseas. It's getting harder because they got old and a lot of them passed away. So but in New York it's still possible, but not all other cities. So that if we go to big enough cities with, you know, enough people, then maybe we can do a smaller scale incorporating local artists. But to keep it like at a really professional level in terms of the traditional presentation, it really involves a lot of people to do it, kind of. But on a smaller scale, you know, so I'm always trying to see if I can like kind of cut back on scale or do something more like a one-person tour or two-person tour, if that's possible. How to make it authentic even though we don't have live musicians, you know. So it's always in the back of my mind. And yes, I really would like the platform and opportunity to actually tour the world and to show people like how beautiful this art form is. So any ideas would be, you know, appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for that. So, and for Raghav, the performance of two, it was set up to be breaking traditional rules and show the collaboration between dancer and musician. And so it's like a freestyle of traditional dance, or is it preset, rehearsed change, or is it a preset rehearsed changes to perform?
Two, as I was speaking about it earlier, was a provocation for me to actually look at how I can use the Kathak principles of improvisation to and fro. The idea that the musician cannot sort of enter and dance with the dancer, and the dancer never plays the tabla. Those were the starting points for me. And then when we started to sort of go into the studio to really come up with structures that we could pin this work, you know, against, we started to we found that we had to have structures that we can improvise within. Otherwise, then it's a little bit too cosmic and it just becomes everything, you know. So what we did was so you really have to see the work to understand what I'm saying, because it's a bit hard to explain the work. It's actually in the viewing, because a lot of it is live. We chat all the way through, we sing, we dance. And so in terms of dancing, the first half of the work is highly improvised. It's structured improvisation. So we've got set tasks that we are going to do, but we do them differently each evening, because he doesn't play the same each night and he doesn't play the same rhythms each night. And so for us, it really becomes a game of concentration, because we have to stay on top of each other to be able to do the task. So this is in a nutshell, but there is a part of the work that is highly choreographed, and it's in tandem with the rhythm. Which is kind of like the culmination of the piece, so which is different to the first half of the work. But in saying that, even that part of the work, I have choreographed the dance. It's a 7-8 minute long solo that just keeps going and going. And Maharshi seems to play even that different each night, because it is live. It's a live instrument. And so what you see is me huffing and puffing and sweating buckets, trying to stay on top of the rhythm, but it is a lot of fun. So in that way, it's breaking a lot of rules of segregation of space, how I utilize the methods and the rhythms themselves. And so there is a combination of improvisational structures and also made structures. So you really have to see it for me to explain it to you.
So on some nights, is he just playing with you to see how tired he can get you to be? So we've got some more Chinese opera questions, you know, like relating to, you know, how the stories connect with audiences nowadays, and, you know, would you consider Western literature, which you obviously have because you've done Shakespeare, in Cantonese opera form. And we're getting short of time, so maybe if you make a quick answer on these ones.
Yeah, I'll just quickly answer both at the same time. Actually, yes, there are the scripts. There are scripts that were written 100 years ago, but actually, Cantonese opera the scripts has been actually ongoing. There have been new scripts produced every year, even up till now. So it's actually, we don't perform those 100-year-old scripts all the time, because they're actually sung in a specialized stage dialect. But almost like once in a while, we do that to preserve the traditions and to show the audience where we actually came from. But nowadays we actually sing in colloquial Cantonese, so it's more easier relatable to the audience. But there are like newly written Cantonese opera shows, like pretty much produced every year, like tons of them. Like for example, if you want to find the most relatable, we had one, someone wrote Trump last year, 2 years ago. Yeah, and you know, no, I wasn't involved with that, but you know, so just to give you an example of how relatable Cantonese opera and versatile Cantonese opera can be. And yes, in terms of the Shakespeare question, I've performed Hamlet. There are also adaptations of King Lear and Macbeth. Actually, I'm helping produce the adaptation of Macbeth next month with another troupe. It's a rerun of that, and yeah, I mean, totally, Shakespeare is great material for us to for Cantonese opera to adapt. So actually would definitely look more into that. Yeah, but there have been like quite a number of Shakespeare's being adapted already. So
yeah. Okay, on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up because it's nearly time. But I would like to thank the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations, and also for the hardworking team behind the scenes, our captioners, Marissa and Olivia, and also the Hong Kong Arts Administration Association and the Australian Performing Arts Market people who have been really amazing in pulling this all together, and Qing, who pulled us together. And of course, both to Raghav and Puyen, it has been really wonderful to hear so much about the richness of your art forms, and you know, how wonderful that they're so traditional, but yet alive and evolving as well. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us here tonight. Yeah, it's been wonderful to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Everybody.
Thank you so much.